Welcome to Dome Theory 94. Welcome back, old friend of the show, Sopan Deb from the New York Times. Great to have you back, Sopan.
Thanks for
No,
having me, man. Always a pleasure.
not much else going on in the NBA. Well, there's actually a lot going on in the NBA world right now, especially on an organizational controversy level. Multiple teams going through that right now, but we're going to focus on the Celtics. Ime Udoka suspended for 1 year. I found this story fascinating, the coverage of it interesting, and of course, there's major implications on a team that was and still is, I guess, to some, an NBA championship favorite here. This is unprecedented in my mind. I have never seen a coach, a front office member suspended by their own team. This wasn't an NBA matter. This was the Celtics going through a law firm investigation, um, finding results, keeping them private, and suspending Udoka in a pretty public way. Now we can get into the leaks and this and that about how it played out and how it was handled by the team. But I want to talk about that. I want to talk about the coverage of it and overall just your first impressions of everything that's gone on here, even though we still don't know a lot.
Well, I hesitate to say too much because there's a lot that we don't know. And the
Mm-hmm.
most important thing that we don't know is what exactly the suspension is for, right? We don't actually know. We don't know the specifics. All we know is that there was a law firm brought in to investigate the allegations. What the allegations were, we don't know. We also know that there were multiple violations, as the as Grausbeck and Brad Stevens said. So we don't know. We don't know who's involved here. Um, it's not uncommon that a company would, opt for privacy and say, "Hey, we're not going to say much." Basketball teams are just a little different because NBA teams are a little different because they're so forward facing. I mean, the coaches have to give press conference, after every practice, and players have to talk to the media, and so it's a weird position that they're in. But it's not that unusual for us to not know about the results of such an investigation. We just don't know anything. We don't know exactly what happened with Udoka.
Yeah, so I want to get into how this has flowed, right? So it leaks through Woj. He's the first one to announce the story. It's vague. It's just, significant punishment possibly coming, violation of team rules. So everyone's saying, "Oh, did he may get in a fight at practice? Is he the next OJ?" Like it could have been anything in between. So next day, I believe shortly after in the morning, is when Shams comes through and says it was an improper consensual relationship in the workplace. And that sort of dictated the reaction to that. And that's sort of the leak that everyone's trying to figure out, right? Where would that have come from? Celtics deny it. I guess it could have been Udoka trying to get it in front of it and spin it his way, although he pretty soon after that came out and accepted the punishment. Doesn't really seem like he's fought this all that much from what we know. So that's the one that's perplexing because Shams' follow up reporting from there sort of indicated that this might not have been consensual. So it starts with people debating, all right, is any kind of workplace relationship acceptable? And is that rising to the level of a year-long suspension? Or is there something more here? And that something more still hasn't become super clear. But some people said if there was any relationship here whatsoever that's improper and was warranted of maybe even firing.
Mm-hmm. Well, without getting into any specific reporters, I think that the notion of power dynamics and consent in the workplace are are uh, are relevant here, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not going to speculate on who leaked to who when because I just don't because we just don't know, and it would just be pure speculation. I did find it, and as I said publicly, I found it quite disconcerting how much certain figures on ESPN, particularly Stephen A. Smith, were openly talking about this as a consensual relationship as if that was established fact. Even leading into the Udoka press conference, the press conference by Brad Stevens and Celtics ownership, and coming out of it, and we don't know if this was consensual. We don't know what the parameters are, and I just don't. I just think there's been a lot of speculation about that without actually knowing the facts. And I think it's really, I think it's our responsibility as media members to not speculate, to without knowing what exactly transpired and why. Um, I think it's fair to surmise that the Celtics didn't take this lightly. They brought in an external law firm. They conducted investigation for a month and a half, 2 months, but we don't know exactly what constitutes consensual and what. Sorry, let me rephrase that. We don't know whether this constitutes a consensual relationship or not, and we just don't know. And what we know is very little. We know that they brought in a law firm. We know that for the investigation took roughly 2 months or so. We know that Udoka has not protested the suspension or um, uh, or or objected to it in any way. Those are the only real knowable facts that we have. As far as who leaked to who, when, I can't speculate that. I wouldn't. I just don't know. I can't speak to that.
Yeah, and I know you don't want to get too deep into the reporting and how that's been handled by who and what, but I do find this interesting in what it says really about sports media today, because in many ways this was covered almost like a trade
Yeah.
or a transaction of some sort, like bits and pieces coming out. Every story is just sort of one small part of this much bigger story, even the initial announcement of it. Now, this was going to come out at some point or another, I'd imagine. So it's not like you can expect that the Celtics were going to keep it airtight and show up on training camp and there was going to be no coach and no reporter would know that and there'd be no leak whatsoever. But the way in which it just kind of leaked out, I think drove a lot of, what you said, the speculation about consensual, not consensual, and people's perception of whether this was a fair suspension or not, and even how the team handled this. Like that just sort of drove everything from that point on. How it was characterized in small bits and pieces of reporting.
Yeah, here's what I'll say about leaks, without commenting on this specific one. Leaks generally. Leaks happen for a reason. They happen in almost all cases to benefit someone or something. It's an attempt to frame a story. It's up to you as a journalist or me to take a look at a leak and say, why am I getting this leak? Is this an accurate representation of a story? Okay. And it's also incumbent on us not necessarily run with the leak without doing any sort of follow-up work. Right. And I'm not talking specifically about anyone. I'm just saying generally. So if I get a tip or something, okay, part of my job is to filter that tip and follow up on it and say, okay, is this, you're telling me X, is X actually true? And how do I use X to get more information before running with it and putting it out there into the world? We have seen, for example, ESPN reporters like Adam Schefter get in trouble for not following up, for not for just running with the first tip that he gets. And so I don't know exactly what happened with Ime Udoka. I'm just saying, generally speaking, leaks almost always happen for a reason. It's an attempt to frame the story. It's an attempt to drive the narrative, And so in a lot of these, when you see anonymous sources, in any story, I think you have to ask yourself, okay, why is this anonymous? Who does it help? Who does this particular leak help? And our jobs as reporters are to add nuance and do follow-up reporting on that. So that's kind of my general thought on leaks. I mean, again, I'm not going to go into specifically who leaked what to whom here because I just don't know. I can't speak to any of that. We all have theories, right? But we just don't know.
And you've covered different areas of politics, a bunch of different stuff. We've always known that NBA and sports reporting works a little bit differently. I mean, the stakes are typically lower. I think there's almost become a lower expectation for the reporting standards that go on here. Does this story specifically call into question how we do things? Like so much of the NBA reporting is driven anonymously and through relationships, and I think we've even come to expect some level of spin based on who's got who's indebted to who source wise here. Like this, I think to me could be a moment where we start to pivot a little bit in terms of expectation because so much of it's speed, right? You got to be first. You got to get the breaking news. You got to get it out there, even if it's incomplete. And we've always been a little bit uncomfortable with that, I think. But like I said, the stakes were low. It's trades and transactions
Well,
that typically
I'm gonna
ends up
stop
being,
you.
yeah.
When you say we've been a little uncomfortable with it, I don't know who we is, because this type of reporting is really being incentivized at every single outlet. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, there's a reason that the quote unquote insiders who break trades 10 seconds before everybody else finds out about it are the highest paid reporters often at the big networks, right? There's a reason for that, right? So I don't, clearly there isn't that much discomfort at the highest levels, the executives who are writing the checks. You
Mm-hmm.
know, so I don't know that necessarily that there's that much discomfort with it. And clearly fans don't care.
Yep. They
Fans don't,
want it.
they want it, and even though they can just if you just wait a minute, they'll just have it, right? Like fans don't care, execs don't care. So who are we? Who's the we here? And frankly, and the other thing I will say is I'm seeing more and more reporters adopt that style of reporting. I don't even call it reporting. That's whatever word you want to use. Whatever. It's not journalism. It's something else. But I'm seeing more and more sports, particularly on the younger side, who are adopting that and saying, okay, I'm seeing this model of success. I know this will get me retweets. I know this will get me, in the conversation and get me aggregated X, Y, and Z. So I'm seeing, I don't know. I actually think that the people who are uncomfortable with that style of, information, information handouts, I think that's in the minority, actually, if anything.
Fair. So what matters here, right? There's so many aspects to the story. There's the gossip, entertainment side. There's the sports side to this, and then of course there's a real story with, I guess, potential victims here, depending on what actually went down. Um, Everyone's called for transparency, even the Celtics players, which was super interesting yesterday. Like they almost seemed like sympathetic to the media in the room at media day, saying, "All right, you guys don't know what's going on. We don't either." What did the Celtics owe? They don't owe anyone anything, but what should we expect the Celtics to be answering at this point in time? Because they can hide behind pretty much everything with that line of privacy, right? And some of it's probably true from a legal standpoint. I'm sure there's probably some things that they could say that maybe just don't reflect well on them.
It's a good question. I don't know the answer to that question because we don't know what happened. We don't know what team policies he violated. We don't know. So, for example, in the NBA, if you are injured and you miss time, the CBA is such that there's certain types of injuries that the NBA can release publicly and say, hey, Derrick Rose is out for 6 to 8 weeks with an ankle injury, right? Okay,
Yep.
that's negotiated with the CBA. That the players have agreed it's okay. I don't believe that's the case for, say, COVID vaccination status. Hey, I'm missing the game because I have COVID. Okay. So there are rules about this stuff. As far as what we should expect from the Celtics, I can't answer that because we don't know what team policies are violated here. We don't know how many, people are involved, how many parties are involved. You're right. They can hide behind privacy a lot, but the privacy rules exist for a reason. They exist, to protect employees on some level, and yes. And by the way, HR exists to protect the company as well. So you're right. As far as what we can expect from the Celtics, I know this is a frustrating answer, but I just don't know because we don't know what has gone on here. I don't know whether there will be updated reporting as to like what happened here. Maybe, I mean, we know there was at least one team staffer involved, right? Maybe the team staffer goes public. But who's to say, let's for the sake of conversation, say it was a team staff. Who's to say the team staffer didn't request to the higher ups that this be kept private. And if that's the case, then maybe the Celtics are trying to do right by the staffer who's affected by this. We just don't know. There's so many uncertainties. I also don't know, because this is such an HR issue, how much transparency a private company owes to the public, even if several of its employees are forward facing.
Yeah, for sure. And the tough part about it from our coverage standpoint is that we just have to sit on that, right? Like there's not a lot we can ask the Celtics if they're not going to answer questions, and there's plenty of damage being done to Udoka's reputation, maybe fairly, maybe unfairly in this case. Again, we don't know, and it's tough to be fair with that. I think that's like sort of what I'm looking at here. Like, is this a fair suspension?
As I think about the one question I have to your what can we expect? The one thing I am curious about, to say a minimum, is that why he wasn't fired versus a suspension. That's the one question that I feel like there should be a little bit of transparency on, because why the suspension versus a firing? What's the upside?
Along with, in the statement, saying his future is unclear beyond the year. So that, like, it doesn't seem promised that he'll be coming back after the suspension. So is this just a legal holdup? Is this sort of a compromise with players to kind of get them on the same page? Like, these are a lot of questions I have too, because you're right.
And I think that the question of, like, okay, what if the Celtics win the championship this year? So are you going to say, okay, Ime, sorry, you're the coach again? What is that? Like, what's the, because there's no, I find it hard to believe that would happen. Right. And so that's one of those I'm a little confused by, and maybe you're right. Maybe if it is, maybe it's a legal holdup, maybe it is. And maybe that's why they're not talking about it. But again, like with many things regarding the situation, we just don't know.
Yeah. And then you start making a lot of assumptions from there. It's like, if there's cause, you probably could fire him. If there isn't, maybe this wasn't handled well. I don't know. Like, there's a lot we just have to speculate on here, which is tough when you're doing a podcast. For the players, their reaction yesterday, I'm sure you saw it. A lot of them confused, a lot of them frustrated. What do you think that says about how this is going to go for the Celtics here this season? They certainly seem to respect Joe Mazzulla, who's going to be the interim. All of Udoka's staff is in place. I'm not sure much is going to change from a strategic standpoint. And the roster, save for Robert Williams, who's injured, is back, and upgrade with Malcolm Brogdon. There's still going to be high expectations here, but it's hard to not wonder what the impact of this is going to be on this team's psyche, particularly when Ime was such an important voice for them last year in terms of turning around the season after that horrible start.
I sound like a broken record. We don't know. But with that being said, look, these guys are professional basketball players, man. Like you gotta, stuff happens. And you're a professional basketball player. You got to go out and play. It's the job, and I hesitate to say that a coach. This is a finals ready. This is a finals ready team. We know that because they went to the finals last year, right? It's hard to say that I think that they're no longer a finals ready team because Udoka's not the coach. This is a team that's gone to the conference finals several times in the last decade with a bunch of the same players. As far as it shouldn't affect the psyche of the team. They should have chemistry. There's a lot of continuity from last year. They seem to like each other. If they don't make the finals, maybe it'll be coaching, but we don't know what kind. Look, Ime Udoka was a rookie head coach last year. He took him to the finals. Who's to say another rookie head coach isn't going to do that? A. B, the bigger concerns for the Celtics, I think, are less coaching and more health. Like Robert Williams missing 3 months of the season. And with Robert Williams, we never know if 3 months is actually 3 months or is actually 6 months, right? Is it 3 months when he comes back and he's playing hurt for the rest of the year? Like, what do we, like? He's been a significant injury risk for most of his career, right? Does losing Gallo, Robert Williams, does Sam Hauser, fill some of the how much of the hole does Sam Hauser fit? Are the Celtics going to regret not picking up like a Boogie Cousins or Dwight Howard or Carmelo or Blake Griffin? Are they going to regret it? Oh, and they haven't been signed, so I guess they'll always be able to go back to them, right? So to me,
or Carmelo Anthony.
Yeah, to me, personnel is always the biggest hang up. And not to like, I mean, look, I haven't played on NBA floors, so I'm sure there are players that are like, you don't understand, like this stuff matters. But like when Frank Vogel got hired to run the Lakers, to coach LeBron and AD, it's not like he was known as some coaching savant. Like Doc Rivers, the year before the Celtics won the championship in 2008, like people were showing up to arenas with paper bags over their heads to get Doc fired.
Yep.
And then Doc wins a championship. And then his reputation since then is still pretty sterling. In fact, in spite of the fact that he's had a lot of playoff flameouts since then. All my point is that we don't know much about coaching. We don't. We know like from an outside on how to judge coaching. You know what I mean? What we do know is kind of like the black and white wins and losses. The first half of last year, people were saying that Udoka was on the hot seat. So we just don't know how to predict coaching, how it's going to really affect teams, how it's going to go. I mean, you look at like Brad Stevens, right? Brad Stevens had a really strong reputation as a coach before he got to the NBA, when he got to the NBA. He never won a ring. I'm not saying that he's not a good. I'm saying that his reputation was higher than like Vogel's, who won a championship. And so I don't think we do a good job judging coaches externally.
It is interesting because if you were gonna name the number one coach in the league right now, probably would still be Greg Popovich, right? And he might have the worst team in the league this year.
I have a lot of thoughts about this because coaching, I think. In this quote star power empowerment, star player empowerment era, I think has come to matter a lot less. Mm-hmm. Think about this. Like, I don't think you'll ever see another Pop, Phil Jackson, or Steve Kerr again. I don't think you'll see. No, I shouldn't say never. But I think it's a lot rarer to see coaches with tenure in the league in the way that there used to be, right? Like if you think about it, I mean, Tyronn Lue getting fired, I think like a year after he won one of the most amazing championships in the history of the sport. Frank Vogel, similar situation. Rick Carlisle, built the program in Dallas, then was pushed out. I mean, it used to be that if you have a championship, pedigree, you pretty much get to write your own ticket as a coach. That's no longer the case, I don't think, unless you're Steve Kerr and Pop and Spo are probably the only two in the whole NBA that can say that at this point. So, I just think the relationship between players and coaches has really, really changed. It's way more about ego management than I think X's and O's at this point.
Yeah, and it depends on the organization. You probably throw Eric Spoelstra in that category of someone who's inseparable from his franchise at this point, regardless of what the personnel is. And he was even in place with some of the stars there, but that might have been the turning point. Like he could have been one of the last guys who, I think in the way you're describing it, are almost like staff members below the stars of a team. I mean, think of the Nets. It's unbelievable what happened with the Nets. Kenny Atkinson rebuilds that team. He's doing great. First year they're injured. There aren't huge expectations, but he's still ousted sort of at the behoovement of the stars, it felt like. And Steve Nash comes in with no coaching experience. And the stars and the organization have defended him through kind of up and down results there, just because they seem comfortable with him, at least until Kevin Durant demanded he got fired this summer.
Well, I mean, Steve Nash is a good example of what I'm talking about at the level, because he didn't even have any assistant coaching experience.
Yeah.
Right. And And so what do we really know about coaching? Like did why did he get hired? And I'm not saying whether he should have been or should not have been, but clearly that lack of kind of years of experience didn't bother. I mean, if you remember, there was criticism that there was like white privilege and, et cetera.
Yeah.
But like, is Steve Nash a good or bad coach? How do we know? How can we judge that? Because the Nets have had just terrible injuries. You had the Kyrie situation. They've had a lot of upheaval. How do we actually know that, let's say, Brad Stevens, is a better coach than X, Y, and Z? What's the marker? Because we're not in the practices. We don't know, we don't know, a lot of your team success, like 80% of it, 90% of it is based on personnel.
Mm-hmm.
I think coaches can make the difference between like, okay, I'm going to call the right out of bounds plays. I got to get these guys motivated and playing together. We just don't know. Like, I can't tell. I know Nets fans are really unhappy with Steve Nash as coach, but when I watch Nets games, I don't see anything that egregious that Nash is doing, given the lack of personnel he's had because of injuries. Like, I'm like, what am I missing that everyone else sees,
And things can change drastically year to year. I mean, Tom, you've mentioned coaches that have been ousted after tremendous years. I remember George Karl, I believe, was the one who got fired after winning Coach of the Year. Wasn't that right? And
I mean, for example, Sam Mitchell was another one. I think they got fired. Dwayne Casey.
Yeah.
I think Dwayne Casey got fired after winning Coach of the Year. So coaching is a really fickle thing. And here are the facts of the matter. If you're the Celtics, Ime Udoka as a rookie coach took your team to the NBA Finals. That team, in theory, improved this offseason with the addition of Brogdon and filled a big, big hole the Celtics had. They needed another playmaker. Okay, and he's a defensive-minded playmaker. Okay, so knowing that, I don't see any reason the Celtics should necessarily be like despondent about not having Udoka this year, because who's to say they can't repeat what happened last year?
Well, I think from a coverage perspective, and who knows what the impact of this was, so many of their swings did seem to be driven by Udoka's public criticism. A lot of his initiatives seemed to translate to the team. And those might continue under Missoula, but I think a lot of it goes back to the voice here, because did the roster change significantly from Stevens to Udoka? Yeah. Kemba, Horford, some bench role player changes happen there. And then even personnel changes happen within the year. If we look back at Josh Richardson and Dennis Schroeder and those trades, Derek White coming in. But the changes within the team had already started to happen at that point. They were playing well before the trade deadline. So I think in this case, I think your point generally is true that coaching's probably become pretty overrated around the league here. But it felt like in this situation in particular, Udoka had a sizable impact on a team that was, a 7 seed under Stevens in his final season with basically the same core of players, Smart, Brown, and Tatum, and then was the 2 seed a year later going to the NBA Finals. And and Joe Mazzulla at his press conference, he's not talking about X's and O's. He's talking about the messaging and the healing and the trust. So a lot of it's intangible, right? I don't think there's a whole lot of scheming and X's and O's here that people are worried about, because Missoula, if he's becoming a head coach, you would assume he's going to be capable on that front, or at least have capable people around him on the staff.
Yeah.
It's a messaging, it's a voice, it's a buy-in thing.
Steve Nash, his rookie year, he put D'Antoni around him, right? And Jacques Vaughn. Jacques Vaughn's been a long-time assistant, but that was one of the first things Steve Nash did.
It's interesting too.
I think about the thing about NBA coaching is that it's not coaching games. I think is a part of what you do as a coach. It's also about being a public face of the team. It's also about deciding, implementing concepts in practice. It's about knowing when to practice, knowing when not to practice. Mm-hmm. But here's the other thing, I say that, and I think I'm going to contradict myself right now, because a lot of NBA teams are practicing less and less.
Yeah.
So maybe the game is, maybe the games are where a coach makes most of his impact.
I'll say this too for the Celtics specifically. The rotations matter too, especially for a team here that is, as you said, bringing in Brogdon. Smart and Brogdon, became a story when Brogdon came in. And I think when you take a longer look at it, they're both going to be able to play a ton here. You do probably have to make a decision on who starts, who sits. But as you said, Robert Williams is injured now, so that's minimized, especially for Missoula right now. But there'll be closing decisions too. And in the finals, Udoka sits Smart in game one down the stretch. They go on this great run in the fourth quarter. That's possibly a formula for success going forward, but it never happens again. And that's one of the toughest things I think a coach has to do in this league is make those difficult closing lineup decisions. Who starts, who sits, that seems to matter to players, as we've seen with Jay Crowder this week. And the management of the talent on their roster, particularly deep talented rosters like the Clippers, who I think they're being overlooked in terms of all the difficult decisions they're going to have to make.
That's a bigger issue to me.
Yeah.
Like they're so personnel's an issue, right? Like Robert Williams' health, Brogdon's been injury prone. Mark Smart, is gets hurt, a decent amount because of his playing style. That's to me the bigger concern. Another concern is that a bunch of the league has gotten much better, right?
Cleveland
has got improved. Philly, I think, had a good offseason. The Bucks got Chris Middleton back. The Clippers essentially are adding Paul George and Kawhi Leonard as free agents. The Lakers get a healthy LeBron and Anthony Davis back, in theory, knock on wood. Denver gets Jamal Murray back. The list goes on and on. But the bigger thing is that the league, I think, will be a lot better, with the caveat that injuries happen all the time and there's no, who knows.
Brooklyn's the biggest asterisk.
Brooklyn gets, in theory, Ben Simmons back and a healthy Durant and Irving on the floor together with no, vax issues. Toronto, I think will be fully healthy, and a lot of teams are just better. Atlanta got DeJounte Murray, and so there's a lot of teams that have improved, but so do the Celtics. We just don't know, and I think you also have to write in a possibility that the Celtics will have internal improvements. Like, look, Marcus Smart is probably going to be better as a point guard than he was last year. I mean, last year was his first full-time year playing point guard. You should see improvement from, some of the younger guys on the team. Maybe Grant Williams makes another jump. Maybe Peyton Pritchard makes another jump, and so forth and so on. So you just it's hard to predict. I mean, but I do think the biggest threat to the Celtics, it's not the head coach, it's availability and the rest of the league just catching up to them. Hey, Bobby, you're muted. Sorry, say it again. I think I lost you there for a second. Nope, lost you there. There you go. Now I got you. Got you back. There you go.
I'm back.
Yeah.
So, what are you most looking forward to this NBA season? You talk about a lot of the improvements around the league, a lot of stars coming back. The Celtics certainly are going to be contenders here in some way or another. What do you think is the biggest story going into this NBA season from your perspective?
The biggest story? They're a bunch of legacy. This season's a big one for legacies, I think. So, for example, in theory, LeBron will overtake Kareem Abdul-Jabbar for number one in points scored. So if LeBron overtakes Kareem, you're going to have a lot of that. I mean, you have Steph Curry and LeBron both going for ring number 5. And, if LeBron wins a ring, that's 5 rings for him. You have to start thinking about, okay, where is he among the Lakers pantheon? Where is he in the all-time NBA grades? Is he number 1 finally? The Nets are, to me, the most interesting team in the league this year because, this is probably a last dance type year for them because I don't think the Nets. I mean, who knows? But who knows? This is likely Kyrie's last year with the Nets, right? If you read the tea leaves.
Last hurrah.
And does that mean Durant's gone after this year? And what are you getting out of Ben Simmons? What are you getting out of Steve Nash? The Athletic reported over the summer that Kevin Durant tried to get him fired. And now they have to navigate this weird, hey, I know you tried to get me fired, but I'm still your coach. It's such a weird it's a weird thing, you know. The Nets are a really weird team. I'm really curious to see how that plays out. Like they could win the finals, they might not make the playoffs. We really don't know. They're an implosion waiting to happen, or they're going to be one of the best teams assembled in the last 5-10 years because they're also healthy in a way they weren't last year. They get Joe Harris back, and you have a couple possible reclamation stories with Ty Warren and then Seth Curry's going to be healthy.
Joe Harris.
Joe Harris, yeah. List goes on and on. I just it's a really interesting. I think that's a really interesting team to watch. But just like every year, man, the NBA's a legacy league. It's all about star legacies, and I'm interested to see how they burst themselves. Like James Harden, man. Like if James Harden doesn't play well again, not that he played bad last year, but he did
said
get
he lost 100 pounds.
I saw that. But James Harden's playoff performances, his playoff history, leaves a lot to be desired. And if he doesn't, again, if he kind of flops again in the playoffs, what does that mean for his legacy? But also, what does it? Should the Sixers run that back? Same for Joel Embiid. Joel Embiid. Look, Joel Embiid is. Let me see how old Joel Embiid is now. Joel Embiid is 28 years old.
Hasn't gone past the second round, right?
And Joel Embiid's also, he's a big man who has injury history
every year almost.
Yeah, how many years of elite play do you have left out of Joel Embiid? Because there are certain players. I'm looking at Kemba Walker. I'm looking at Blake Griffin. I'm looking at so that really hit a really sharp decline once they get to 31, 32. So you wonder how many years of peak Joel Embiid you have left. And then there are players that I'm just excited to watch because I just love watching them play, like Jokic. I love big men that can pass. I love Giannis. I love watching 6'10", 6'11" guys that are like throwing behind the back passes.
And you hope all those guys stay healthy this year. Last year seemed particularly bad on the injury front. It was like Durant misses half the year, Simmons out all season for different reasons. But you have Murray, as you mentioned, Michael Porter pretty much missed the entire year. Zion showed up with a broken foot and never played. I'm excited to see him back out there. Did you catch the Simmons interview on JJ Redick's podcast?
Oh, yes, I did.
So we're talking Nets. What did that say to you about his future?
I think there were a lot of follow-ups I wanted asked because, I didn't. It doesn't seem like I didn't get a sense of whether he feels. Like JJ at one point asked him, "Hey, are you going to shoot more threes?" And he's like, "Oh, well, I gotta." But there's other stuff I can do, and I couldn't tell if he was joking or not.
Yeah,
I don't have a good sense of whether Ben Simmons is going to change his game at all, or whether he feels like he needs to, whether he feels like any of the criticism leveled against him over the last couple of years is legitimate. Like I didn't have a good sense that he has looked in the mirror at all about how the last couple of years went in Philly.
Yeah, because a lot of the conversation there was two-sided, right? It was they were joking around about some of the mishaps a little bit, particularly the passed up dunk. But then they started making excuses for it too, even though he accepted that it didn't look good on the camera there. So it sort of reflected.
I wish we got a better sense of what happened, and really kind of went line by line about some of the stuff that was said about him. What happened in the spring when he didn't come back for the Celtics series. But again, obviously he needed back surgery. Like that's a pretty serious thing.
Yeah,
right?
He said he couldn't move that morning. Yeah.
And so, okay, but then the question is, why did the Nets think you were coming back? Because they were because the support of Simmons from Steve Nash, it was kind of tepid a little bit about why he wasn't playing. Oh, well, we thought, and so, okay, how did that make you feel? And I just wish there was a little bit more, it went a little bit more in depth, but I don't know. With Ben Simmons, look, we're going to see what his game is like when he comes back. We're going to see, we're going to see, it's hard to know what you're getting out of him. And the funny thing is, I don't actually know if you need him to shoot threes. Like if you play Ben Simmons in a lineup with Kyrie, a great 3-point shooter, Kevin Durant, exceptional 3-point shooter, Harris, exceptional 3-point shooter. And, I don't know, you could either go small or you can, start Seth Curry and just go Durant at the 5, which probably you don't want. But, you could start Claxton, right, at the 5. Maybe you don't need him to shoot with 3 great shooters around you.
There's so
Maybe.
many questions there. Yeah, because he fits in on this team on paper, and that's what I thought the trade made a lot of sense because of that. Like he just seems, for all the reasons you said, to be an ideal fit there. But you playing him and Claxton together. I think the last time we saw Claxton, he went 1 for 11 from the free
Oh,
throw
yeah.
line. So you have 2 guys who can't hit a free throw. He's never had a play center, realistically, playing next to Embiid his whole career. Simmons, that is.
Yeah. And
He's not the point guard on this team.
I don't think that he can. I don't think that he can play center full time. I'm not saying
Yeah.
you can play a small ball. I mean, the question that Steve Nash is going to have to answer is, okay, is Kyrie effective off the ball? Because Kyrie, like, one of his best attribute is his ball handling and his ability to break down off the dribble. So then, how does that affect the team if defenses are sacking off Ben, right, to guard Kyrie, to double up on Kyrie or Kevin or whatever? So I think we're gonna find out. But Simmons is also an excellent cutter. He's excellent getting to the rim. Once he gets into that paint area, he's really strong. He can post up. He can do a lot. He can do a lot of stuff. And so we'll see.
So Sopan, you have a new book out. I want to talk to you about that next time we get you back here. But I want to shout out as well to whoever's watching here. I haven't had the chance to read your second book yet. I love Mistranslations, your first book, memoir, novel. It was amazing. One of my favorite books I've ever read. I'm excited to read this follow-up. Tell everybody a little bit about Akia Das's second act.
Thanks so much. Yeah. So it's my debut novel. It's based on this, a lot of my own upbringing, but it's basically about the splintered Bengali family in New Jersey that is split apart by grief, by how they treated their teenage daughter who has passed away, and they aim to come together when they find a play that she has written, and that before she died, and they try to stage the play without knowing anything about theater, and it's a way of coming together, and it's about the changing power of art. And I'm really excited about it. I'm glad it's out there in the world, that people are getting to read it. And I love being able to create this universe that the family lives in, and I'm also a big theater fan, so I like to be able to indulge my love of theater.
Yeah, for anyone who hasn't read Mistranslations either, that, like, the way you dove into your family for that year, whatever that was there, and going out to India and meeting your father, that was one of, like, just the most heartwarming stories ever. And I just love that book. Like, it was one of those ones that just sucked me in page for page, and I could probably go back and even read it again and enjoy it again. So
Thank you, Bobby. I really appreciate it, man.
Appreciate you putting your life out in the world and sharing it with everybody. A couple of our sponsors before we get out of here. Appreciate you being here, Sopan. We have AG1. Go over there, athleticgreens.com/garden. Get a year supply of vitamin D, 5 free travel packs when you make your first purchase, and we'll send you our official Garden Report t-shirt. Phenomenal. And we, of course, are brought to you by Calm. Head over to calm.com/garden. Get 40% off a premium subscription when you sign up over there. So, Ben, appreciate you being here. Hopefully we'll have you back soon. Go read him in the New York Times. Anything good coming over there?
I'm sure they will be. We're not hard to find. So
appreciate it, so Ben. We'll talk to you soon.
Bobby. All right, man.